This was not a war of one nation, but a homeland defended by two peoples. This was not an ordinary clash, but an epic written in the blood of heroes. Ink-black sea mist rolled over the shores of 16th century Joseon. The setting sun, like blood, stained the shattered planks of ships dark red. While unseen currents beneath the waves carried rusted weapons, silently whispering of the lingering gunpowder. Yi Sun-shin knew that this was not the end of the war, but the beginning of another massacre. The story begins with the fall of an era. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the Taiko who unleashed the Imjin War and brought 7 years of devastation to the Joseon Peninsula, was nearing the end of his life. On his deathbed, he left a final command. All Japanese forces in Joseon were to withdraw immediately, and he entrusted his young son, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, to the ambitious Tokugawa Ieyasu. In 1598, with Toyotomi Hideyoshi's death, the 7-year war seemed to have finally reached its conclusion. Yet for the Japanese troops stranded in southern Joseon, the road home was anything but easy. Trapped within the walls of Shuntian Yikiao City, Konishi Yukinaga and his army found themselves under siege. Their seaward escape was completely blocked by a combined fleet of 350 Joseon and Ming warships, led by the man whose name struck terror into every Japanese pirate, Yi Sun-shin. Inside the besieged city, hell had come to earth. Soldiers had resorted to eating the corpses of the dead. The Japanese army was on the brink of collapse. Konishi Yukinaga knew he was the last to receive the order to retreat, and behind this delay lay Tokugawa Ieyasu's treachery. If he could not return to Japan swiftly, not only would his own life be forfeit, but the young Lord Toyotomi Hideyoshi would also be in grave danger. Desperate for survival, he pinned his hopes on a Ming general, but Liu Ting, the Ming army commander he had bribed heavily, washed his hands of the matter. The navy was not his responsibility, he said. If they wanted passage, they would have to deal with Admiral Chen Lin. Meanwhile, in the Joseon naval camp, most commanders believed the war was over. Konishi Yukinaga was cornered. The Japanese surrender was only a matter of time. Only Yi Sun-shin, the battle-hardened naval commander, showed no sign of relaxation in his gaze. He understood that Konishi Yukinaga, a central figure in this war, would never surrender without a fight. A bloodier battle was brewing. Sure enough, Konishi's envoy, Arima Harunobu, arrived at Chen Lin's camp laden with gifts. Arima Harunobu acted arrogantly, claiming they were coming to seek peace, not surrender. These words completely infuriated Chen Lin.
それがしはわしが申し入れに参ったのであって、ここに参ったのではありませぬ。
我要是不肯呢？
酒のごとく、太閤この兵が傷つく不祥事が起こるでありましょう。
去告诉小西心下，想要和平就要付出相应的代价。求和，想都不要想。
He lost his temper on the spot and kicked Arima Harunobu out. When Arima reported Chen Lin's words to Konishi Yukinaga, the meaning of the price became clear. Without hesitation, he sent all the treasures he had accumulated, along with 2,000 heads of Japanese pirates, to Chen Lin. He would buy his way to survival with these gruesome achievements. But his greatest obstacle was not the greedy Chen Lin, it was Yi Sun-shin.
南海島にはあのような首が山のことが積まれております。それがしをお送りくだされば、このほどの首の10倍をお持ちいたします。
你们想想原因。
帝人が封鎖を解いたとて、李承信が黙っておるでしょうか。小西殿が順天井を抜け出し、左水栄王宮を離れるほどの時を稼ぐ争いであります。大国の天平を傷つけることは決してありますまい。我が殿、小西行長がしかとちぎりをいたしました。
Yi Sun-shin had seen through it all. Through Junsa, a Japanese turncoat planted in the Ming ranks, he knew Konishi's every move. The veteran general carried a deep personal wound.
No!
His beloved son, Yi Myun, had been slaughtered by Japanese pirates. Though he knew the identity of his son's killer, he chose to bury his vengeance. He understood the weight of national grievance over personal loss. Meanwhile, the Japanese pirates who murdered Yi Myun were brought before Chen Lin. When his officers asked Chen Lin if he should tell Yi Sun-shin about this, Chen Lin chose to keep it secret.
展检蟹保密。
Joseon soldiers informed Yi Sun-shin that 3 enemy ships loaded with cargo had entered the Ming camp. Now, as Chen Lin accepted the bribe and prepared to let the tiger escape, Yi Sun-shin could no longer stand by. He boarded Chen Lin's flagship and confronted him face to face. Chen Lin said that Yi Sun-shin had made great military achievements, so everything ended here. But Yi Sun-shin declared that, as a general, he could never let his enemy escape, no matter the cost. Chen Lin tried to deflect, suggesting they focus on attacking other Japanese remnants instead. He even goaded Yi Sun-shin, exploiting his grief over his son's death, implying that personal vengeance should not interfere with the greater cause. Yi Sun-shin's response was firm and resolute. The confrontation erupted. When Yi Sun-shin saw the human head in the wooden box in front of him, his heart was filled with grief. He knew these were the heads of innocent Joseon civilians, not traitors who had sided with the Japanese, as Chen Lin claimed. Yi Sun-shin questioned Chen Lin, asking why he let his enemy go since he was the reinforcement sent by the Ming emperor to support Joseon. Chen Lin drew the imperial sword, a symbol of absolute authority.
圣上这样，还有意见？去镇伪镇鲁右看你。是，无是。
In the face of absolute power, Yi Sun-shin did not flinch at all. He declared that if Chen Lin refused to fight alongside him, the combined Joseon Ming fleet would disband. Joseon would face the enemy alone. Meanwhile, cornered and desperate, Konishi Yukinaga sent a final envoy to Shimazu Yoshihiro's camp for aid. Shimazu Yoshihiro, a man infamous for his brutality and ferocity, initially refused to intervene. But the envoy presented a letter. Its contents struck directly at Shimazu's ambition. Konishi argued that the only reason Japan had failed to win the 7-year war was Yi Sun-shin. If they did not eliminate him now, should civil war ever break out in Japan, Yi Sun-shin's fleet would cross the sea unopposed and no one could stop him. He proposed that Shimazu Yoshihiro dispatch the main fleet while Konishi Yukinaga attack from Hideyoshi Castle. This would completely eliminate Yi Sun-shin, the mortal threat. In doing so, Shimazu Yoshihiro would become Japan's hero, a man even Tokugawa Ieyasu would have to respect. The words ignited a greedy fire in Shimazu's eyes. He immediately ordered 500 elite warships to set sail, their target, Shuntian Yikiao City. At that moment, in Chen Lin's command headquarters, a general, incensed by Yi Sun-shin's proposal to dissolve the Joseon-Ming alliance, moved to have him court-martialed. However, another general overruled the attempt. Chen Lin thought of Yi Sun-shin's tragic loss of his beloved son and ordered the captured Japanese pirates to be handed over to Yi Sun-shin. When Yi Sun-shin learned that among them was the man who had killed his son, he turned away without a word. Chen Lin declared that the prisoners were Yi Sun-shin's to handle. He ordered Yi Sun-shin to execute the murderers and then lift the naval blockade. Hearing this, Yi Sun-shin took a torch and held it to the faces of the prisoners. The scene before him seemed to conjure the brutal image of his son's death once more. The faces of the killers burned into his memory. But in the next moment, Yi Sun-shin denied that these men were the ones who had murdered his son, Yi Myun. Chen Lin, furious, seized a guard's sword and struck down 3 of the Japanese prisoners himself. At the same time, the coalition forces are making intensive strategic deployments. They had already guessed that the enemy would come to reinforce them, and they would then be caught in a situation where they were attacked from both sides. Without a word, Yi Sun-shin pointed to a spot on the map. A meticulously planned ambush was about to unfold. An unprecedented naval battle was poised to begin in the Noryang Strait. After weighing the risks, Chen Lin ultimately chose to stand with Yi Sun-shin. When news arrived that 500 enemy warships were bearing down on them, fear spread across the faces of the commanders. But Yi Sun-shin remained eerily calm. He pointed to an unassuming location on the map, Guanyinpu. Yi Sun-shin was ready to abandon the blockade and retreat, luring the enemy into this narrow death trap. He wanted to win the battle quickly and bury these 500 enemy ships along with 7 years of hatred before sunrise. On the eve of the battle, Yi Sun-shin took out the roster of every soldier who had fallen over the past 7 years. Each familiar name seemed to whisper of blood debts unpaid. prayed to the heavens, offering his own life in exchange for total victory, the annihilation of every last invader. As night fell, Shimazu Yoshihiro's massive fleet glided like ghosts into the Noryang Strait. His warriors were formidable. Takahara Soshima, brimming with confidence, believed Yi Sun-shin would never expect them to arrive so swiftly at Shuntian Yikiao City. However, Arima Harunobu, who was beside him, stated that Yi Sun-shin had planted numerous spies within the Japanese army. Therefore, they should devise a strategy at this point. But the conceited Takahara Soshima didn't care. But he didn't know that all this had already been calculated by Yi Sun-shin. Thick sea fog shrouded the strait, hiding the deadly ambush. Just as the Japanese believed the path ahead was clear, a monstrous silhouette emerged from the darkness. The turtle ship, the pride of the Joseon Navy. Like an impregnable fortress, it shattered the Japanese vanguard in an instant. From afar, the battle-hardened Shimazu Yoshihiro observed the chaos with cold detachment. The turtle ship that Shimazu Yoshihiro personally burned in the Battle of Shichonryo has reappeared in the world so quickly. Then, Yi Sun-shin's main fleet struck from all directions. Flames roared across the water, cannons thundered, and the sea became a wall of fire, cutting off the Japanese retreat. Terazawa Masashi's forces came under Yi Sun-shin's relentless assault. Desperate, he ordered his men to send up a signal for reinforcements to Shimazu Yoshihiro. Seeing the distant flare, Shimazu Yoshihiro commanded his fleet to advance. Just then, a commander spotted the Ming fleet appearing on the horizon, yet Shimazu Yoshihiro remained composed. He calmly ordered Toyohisa Shimazu to press forward. The battle ahead was fierce. Countless arrows rained down on the Japanese invaders. Witnessing the chaos, Shimazu Yoshihiro gave the order to halt. Faced with desperation, Shimazu Yoshihiro revealed his ruthless side. He commanded his own cannons to fire indiscriminately at the burning vanguard ships ahead, using the flesh and blood of his own allies to extinguish the flames and clear a path for the rest of his forces. This brutal tactic shocked even the Joseon Navy. The fighting grew more savage. The turtle ship, under relentless assault, sank. The Japanese Navy let out triumphant roars, a stark contrast to the grim determination of the Joseon fleet. Yi Sun-shin ordered a full-scale attack, vowing to annihilate the enemy. As the battle raged, Deng Zilong took the initiative, leading a contingent of Ming naval forces in a bold assault. Not far off, Chen Lin witnessed the unfolding chaos. Seeing the intensity of the fight escalate, Chen Lin ordered his fleet to advance at full speed, rushing to reinforce the Joseon Navy. Shimazu Yoshihiro also noticed Deng Zilong fighting against the Japanese pirates not far away. The Ming fleet joined the battle. As Ming warships closed in, Shimazu Yoshihiro, enraged, kicked Arima Harunobu to the ground. He realized he had fallen for Konishi Yukinaga's deception, and his fury burned. He then ordered the tongue of the messenger from Konishi Yukinaga to be cut out and then tied to the mast of the ship. The battle was far fiercer than anticipated. The Japanese Navy, well-drilled and disciplined, shifted formations with deadly precision, their overwhelming firepower pushing the Ming forces to the brink. Chen Lin had no choice but to order a tactical retreat, but what Shimazu Yoshihiro never saw coming was that this, too, was part of Yi Sun-shin's trap. In this way, the enemy was cut in two by Yi Sun-shin's troops, making it impossible for the front and rear ships to respond effectively. To seize the moment and aid Yi, Chen Lin defied the odds, shifting his forces from defense to a full-scale counterattack. But this bold move played right into Shimazu's hands. Though the Ming ships were larger and armed with heavy cannons, the Japanese vessels were faster, more agile, and far greater in number. Swarms of enemy soldiers stormed aboard, forcing Chen Lin himself into the thick of the fighting. Shimazu, obsessed with capturing Chen Lin alive, saw him as the key to forcing a swift end to the war. Yet, just as the noose tightened, Deng Zilong arrived in the nick of time, shielding Chen Lin and ensuring his narrow escape from certain doom. Deng Zilong charged ahead and fell in battle. Chen Lin's flagship was surrounded, trapped in peril. At the critical moment, Yi Sun-shin sent Junsa in a small boat to rescue him. Junsa fought through the encirclement, carving a path to safety for Chen Lin at the cost of his own life. Seeing the battle turn against him, Shimazu Yoshihiro ordered a retreat, attempting to flee to the open seas to the south. Yi Sun-shin feigned pursuit, luring the enemy step by step toward their final destination, Guanyinpu. As Shimazu's fleet sailed into the narrow inlet, they found the Joseon main fleet waiting in formation. Only then did Shimazu realize there was no escape. The retreat was cut off, countless cannons aimed at them. Shimazu Yoshihiro was trapped in a sea of death. Shimazu Yoshihiro's remaining forces launched a desperate final charge. The battle entered the bloodiest and most intense stage. To rally his troops, Yi Sun-shin climbed onto the deck himself and beat the war drum. Leading from the front, he endured the hail of bullets and arrows, directing the final assault with the rhythm of his drum. He told his men that if they let the enemy escape, the war's bitterness would only deepen. They had to annihilate the enemy, even if it meant chasing them to the ends of the earth. Cannon fire filled the sky, battle cries shook the heavens, and banners fell in the blood and fire, only to be raised again. Suddenly, a single, treacherous bullet struck from the darkness. It found its mark. Yi Sun-shin, the guardian of Joseon, fell slowly to the ground. With his last breath, he summoned all his strength to issue a final command to his son and nephew.
반드시 놈들을 열도 끝까지라도 쫓아서 기어이 완전한 항복을 받아내어야 한다.
His son, fighting back tears, shielded his father's body with his own. The thunderous drumbeat still echoed across the water. It seemed to declare to all that their admiral was still fighting. Inspired by the unceasing rhythm, the Joseon-Ming alliance launched their final devastating assault. The Japanese forces collapsed entirely. Shimazu Yoshihiro and Konishi Yukinaga fled in disarray with their remaining troops. The Battle of Noryang ended in a complete victory for the Joseon-Ming alliance. Over 300 enemy ships were burned, and more than 20,000 enemy soldiers were killed. It was the largest and bloodiest battle of the 7-year Imjin War. Yi Sun-shin, the admiral of the Joseon Navy, fell in battle. With his life, he brought a definitive end to this brutal war. He finally understood this was not just an invasion, it was a war that demanded blood for blood. As Chen-lin gazed at the stars, he at last grasped Yi Sun-shin's greatness. The general's star, shining even in daylight, was the undying spirit of Yi Sun-shin. It was also his unfinished legacy, the deepest devotion to his nation.